Hello everyone, we got ourselves some best of fives and a best of seven finals for the KSL Summer Slam that happened a little bit ago. So we do have game number one of the first semifinal right here on Ancient Cistern. In the bottom left, we're going to have Dark. In the top right, it is herO. So of course the KSL being the Korean StarCraft League, a community endeavor to basically help the Koreans, which they got hit the hardest when it came to this year's, I guess, cutting of funding because Blizzard left us. Very, very sad. But Korea in particular is hit hard, and the Korean players obviously still want to be playing. Many of them still at the top of their form, so giving them more opportunities to do so and more money to do so is a great endeavor indeed. So you can help out if you go to their Patreon as well. We do have a weekly thing going on, and then this was an extra special tournament on top of it that played out in the wee hours of the morning. So yeah, I did not get up for it, but happy to have access to the replays because I also support their Patreon. So now that we've got that kind of covered, we can talk about the players of this tournament, so the players of this particular match, as we have Dark, who is a very aggressive Zerg player, versus herO, who is a very aggressive Protoss player, and these guys face off against each other in these online tournaments pretty much the most frequently. Maybe not the most frequently. I mean, you know, Clem and Max Packs constantly face off against each other. Solar plays a lot of these online tournaments. We'll be seeing him in the other semifinal as well. So it's a lot of times, even sometimes you see like Solar versus herO. But I feel like herO Dark is one of the most played out of the Korean scene. And fortunately, they're very exciting despite the amount of times they've played against each other. If this was just constantly 40-minute PvZs heading into Mothership Broodlord territory, I think we'd all be a little disappointed by that. But anytime we see herO and Dark, I think everyone gets a little excited because both players bring a lot of action, a lot of excitement to their game, no matter the matchup. And then you add on top of that the dynamic that these two have against each other, kind of aggression versus aggression, as well as the mind games that go into it. And, you know, it's always exciting, basically. I don't know if I've ever gotten tired of it, but then again, I don't cast every single Korean StarCraft tournament that there is. If I did, hopefully I'd still be excited for it. And hopefully you guys are excited for this best of five. I believe the reviews, if you can call it that, of the semis and the finals were fantastic. I tried my best to stay unspoiled, however, so all I got to see was that they are some banger matches. I'm hoping they're living up to the hype. So the PvZ first of all, and then the other semifinal is going to be Solar versus Maru, so a really exciting TVZ. And then who knows for the finals? We're going to find out within the next two series, this one included. And I've been talking about a lot of not important stuff because a lot of not important stuff has really been happening. We had a typical pro block from herO to force Dark to take that third as his natural. His actual third is on the way. And then we have herO. Okay, starting to do something a little bit different. So went into the Stargate, not big surprise, but then actually goes into a Phoenix first. So much more often we're seeing a lot of Oracle openers, as I'm sure many of you do know. And if you do get a Phoenix, I mean, I guess I've seen some go 2 Oracle, 1 Phoenix. That can help hide some of the trickier follow-ups to such a Stargate opener. It can also help pick up a queen and allow the other oracles to actually do the damage on whatever queens are left over. So that has kind of come back in a couple of times. But this Phoenix first means that the oracle doesn't get across the map and maybe get a couple of shots off where the spore crawler is actually done. It does mean that Dark is completely unaware as what is actually happening behind this. You know, if it was that Oracle first into a second Oracle, you're kind of putting together the puzzle, and it's one that looks relatively normal. You do have to keep in mind some of the trickier follow-ups, sure, but it's more of the normal opener. But a Phoenix right off the bat, that Overlord doesn't get a chance to even see if the gases have been taken, when they've been taken, so far not taken. herO slaps down all the technology first and foremost, now adds on only 1 additional gas. There we go, 2 additional gases. As he is getting a Forge and a Robo, I was not expecting any such aggressive blink openers, but I mean, you always have to worry about that when you face herO, who certainly helps to develop. I mean, basically did develop the Mass Gateway style versus Zerg, gave us a new era of PvZ, thankfully, because the old era was not particularly entertaining. And while it's not the thing that encompasses all of the PvZs nowadays, it is something that is possible. Going into Mass Stalker, Mass Zealot, playing heavy expansion, low gas, going around all of the map and actually kind of beating the Zerg at their own game. We know that is possible, and that is big thanks to this guy, but we also have, you know, far more typical things such as Charge Archon, which actually seems to be what herO is going to be going into. A Phoenix and a single Oracle is the only thing he was creating out of that Stargate. And we do have a lot of gateways coming down. I mean, you do have 4 gases, but actually a little bit tricky here. 2 probes out of those gases entirely. Yeah, so there's enough to afford an observer +1, maybe a couple of sentries, couple of stalkers should you need that, but then mostly it's all about that charge lot warping in, and you can go ahead and get perfectly saturated on the mineral only base of the 3rd. It would be maybe a little bit concerning to the Zerg if they were to see this for a long period of time. That lack of additional gas and the additional teching up that a Protoss can, you know, usually be doing. Usually that's their goal, but, you know, Dark actually isn't scouting all that much, so that's a little concerning. There we go. So finally gets in here. Doesn't see that 5th or 6th gas, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's all charge lots. Oops, all charge lots, but it's a pretty good hint, and it does look like with the Warp Prism also being scouted, that is the real confirmation that something very aggressive is headed Dark's way, and Dark only has +1 melee lings right now. The Baneling did finish. 11 Banelings are on the way. Roachwarn started up as soon as he saw that Warp Prism, but is not going to be helpful for right here, right now. herO going for a dedicated attack, no doubt. He severely limits his follow-up by doing this, but if the charge lots get enough damage done, then it'll certainly be worth it. Stasis Trap not really helping out too much. Warp Prism trying to help Micro, but also trying to get away from the Queens. It is going to get a successful warp in, and the Zealots are trying to win the battle here, but with that +1 melee also done, the Lings actually did their job with the help of all of the Queens. Just enough Lings to really make do. Dark didn't even need the Banelings back at home. He actually used them offensively. 15 probes go down. That is a bold decision. An all Ling player versus all charge lot player. Typically, the charge lot player is the one that wins. And now a couple Banelings are back at home. They're going to help out a little bit, force that spread from the Zealots, but it was a good spread, and the Ling count is actually woefully low. So while that spread of the Zealots means that every one of them gets surrounded by the Lings, that's only the case if you have Lings. Dark having a serious larva problem, as many Ling-based players do, especially with all of his Queens pulled away, and now we see the extra effectiveness of Mass Zealot versus Mass Ling. It's just the amount that you can produce. One is more stalled out by the mechanic that Zerg has than the Protoss mechanic, which, you know, get the warp-ins and then just spam them as much as you possibly can. Queen goes down. That's another inject missing. 11 drones have fallen. herO starting to make up for the damage that they took back at home, but not actually totally winning yet. Another warp in, while it's still only Lings, might have actually contributed greatly to the amount of damage here. More Queens would have fallen, a couple of drones would have fallen. However, it looks like herO, despite that one surge, that one moment where it looked like the Lings were a little too low, actually has not done the damage he needs. And with the Queen still having plenty of transfuses and in the right location at the right time, that 4th hatchery is not going to go down, even going after the Warp Prism a little bit here. Stutter Step on the Queens just a little, and there you have it. Transfuses do come down. The hatchery is safe, but to make it safer from any attempted snipes, because herO actually is not done yet. He is still only on 4 gases, but did saturate those 3rd and 4th gases. He's adding on 4 Archons because he was mining off of a decent amount of gas and not using gas basically at all, right? So he had a bank, and now 4 Archons suddenly included with this is a bit scary. That hatchery is certainly in danger. The Queens were pulled away. Not many transfuses left. No Ravagers either. The Roaches actually, without their speed, incapable of escaping particularly quickly. They are getting blasted by the Archon shots whenever they just stand still, and it's going to be more charge lots to actually finish off this hatchery. I'm not sure herO can do any more. He knows that Dark is probably reinforcing as quick as he possibly can. There could be 20 Ravagers for all he knows, finishing up behind enemy lines, although there is an Observer, so I guess you could tell that's not actually the case. But the point is, there could still be a lot of Roaches popping, and in this case, the Protoss is going to play a little bit safe. Maybe they could have continued, but for Dark fans out there, it's a good thing herO didn't. Dark needs time to recover, build up the Banelings, build up, I would assume, a couple of Ravagers, but can't actually afford it. Just trying to build as many Roaches and Banelings as possible, and herO actually not going to go any deeper with this. Just going to use the Warp Prism to go for some Archon drops, control the area a little bit while he macros back at home. He does have his 5th and 6th gases finally ready to go. Another Archon added in, and he did start up +1 armor, so he'll have not even equal upgrades, actually. It'll be +2 melee, +1 missile. Well, I guess he'll have an equal upgrade for a little while. And it's certainly better than nothing. But herO, the question really is, did he do enough damage? I would say so. Because Dark lost that 4th base. Even if he hadn't, the drone count wasn't really living up to 4 bases anyway. Dark has been on a low drone count, I would say, since the drones died. So if those were the drones, you just add them up to this number, and there was 72. That's a good number. But they died, and then Dark has not had time to replace them, so 60 is very mediocre, actually. 60 is certainly all-in territory, but there's one player who's particularly good at playing Zerg on a low drone count, and that is Dark. He very often finds himself in the situation, whether it's versus Terran or Protoss or Zerg. It seems to happen to him more than most, and half the time it's on purpose, because he is all-inning. And the other half, it's because he kind of screwed up some early game defense and he's just making a comeback. So he has a lot of practice with this. And Ling, Baneling, Roach, Ravager is still a very fearsome composition when you don't treat it with respect. If you just think, la 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 la, I'm winning, you're not the most capable Zerg, I've hamstrung you, you know. I'm going to go ahead and just A-move. That actually can cause a lot of problems. So herO maybe could have forced the issue a little bit while we're still purely on roaches. Maybe. But deciding that he did enough damage, and he certainly suppressed the Zerg from really blossoming as a Zerg would want to, just says, I'm going to pack it up, go home, 3 base gases, 4th base on the way, and that's what I'm going to really focus on, defending the 4th base. And now we're in kind of a typical PvZ scenario, which is the Zerg player trying to kill the Protoss player as the Protoss stands firm as a wall. So we're not watching Showtime, but herO's definitely going to be trying to be a wall. And then maybe after a couple of attacks he'll go for the throat. But honestly, with the way that these games set up, a lot of the time it's the Zerg who just taps out. The Protoss doesn't even end up having to go across the map because the Zerg just recognizes they can't break the 4th base. They're not going to win the game. Let's see if Dark can break the 4th base. He is entering onto the high ground at the very least. That's still a lot of Archons, a Colossus, second one on the way, Warp Prism, Micring, even the Phoenix coming in to help. Why the heck not? And was that all without a shield body overcharge? No, okay, I was going to say that would have been pretty impressive, but he did pop it. But he didn't, I don't even really know if he, well, he needed it to keep a lot of these Archons alive. It's more like he's not concerned he doesn't have it, which is a bad sign for the Zerg player who would at least hope that they'd have a follow-up that would catch the Protoss off guard. Perhaps more units than Dark was, herO was expecting. He lost 2 Archons on the front lines, and that Disruptor almost gave me a heart attack, but there was a last-second split. Dark does still have a supply to work with, shall we say. Some decent upgrades, but the upgrades are going to be even frankly better for the Protoss, since the Roaches, which we are now purely working with, only have 1 missile. You know, that +2 melee is not helping out here. No Lings, no Banelings on the defense. And, well, I was going to say very few on the offense, but actually Lings do slip on by. Disruptor gets taken down, and Probes will absolutely fall. That forces a recall from herO, who doesn't really want to mess up his ultimate game plan, which is to keep everything nice and tidy back at home and then just strike on the offense. This is actually really ruining his plans, and Dark is going to take full advantage of it, not just sending those Lings into the natural, but also sending the Roach Ravager on top of the 4th base, which is now without any defenses. 29 probes have already gone down, more to fall perhaps. The Banelings are cleaned up in the natural, and the probes have been evacuated from the 4th base, so 29 probes will be the end of it. Still a decent amount lost, but you are on 4 Nexus. Some Chronos can go into it, and the Protoss army actually remained intact. So now we have that classic dilemma where you did the economic damage, but you didn't take care of the army, and the army was already getting better than yours anyway in just classic PvZ fashion. It also got some additional upgrades, and, well, you're in a lot of trouble as a Zerg player. Disruptors are going to pop off. Actually, a pretty good split, all things considered. Corrosive Bile is raining down, trying to return some of that damage, but the Protoss army still mostly intact. Probes are going down once again, turning this into an all-in for herO, but it's an all-in that he can certainly win. A couple of units actually getting sidetracked, coming in from random directions, making this a little more awkward, as the Zealots also are busy trying to catch up to the Roach Ravager and not necessarily doing the damage, but Dark can only micro so much. Eventually he has to return home and defend all of his bases, but man, this Protoss army is really all over the place. It might be a good thing, could be a bad thing if there was more reinforcements, but Dark actually, without any amount of bank and no supply either, is really depending on these Lings to force it to be a true all-in, and then these Ravagers to micro till the end of the earth, which I don't think is possible. As much as they want to try, the Ravagers cannot do literally everything, although taking on 3 Immortals is commendable, and they almost do, but the Warp Prism pickup is there. 2 more Archons are joining in. The rest of the Protoss army, I was going to say, is scattered around, and actually this is where it does hurt that it's scattered around. Colossus fell, Disruptors fell, Archons fell, things are getting surrounded, and herO might have let this game slip through his fingers. Oh no! Oh, he did! Dark with the Ling run by, forcing it to be an entire all-in. herO goes for it, has certainly the better army. The upgrades are good, the composition is good. The army supply, when it's even with a Zerg player, like with that composition, is a fantastic position to be for the Protoss. But then he let his army get disjointed, and not in a particularly effective way, like when you send 12 Zealots over to the other bases to create chaos. It was a lot of important units that were just independent from each other that then could get surrounded, and alone they're not nearly as powerful as they are together. Very unfortunate game for herO, but that is Dark to a T, man. Really showing how powerful he is in these scrappier scenarios for PvZ. Excellent game number 1. Let's get into game number 2. So here we are in game number 2 on Gressfawn this time around, and despite the odds, Dark is up 1-0, spawning in the bottom right. And in the top left, we do have herO. Also teammates, if you guys didn't notice, both playing for DKZ. And because the Korean scene is certainly more close-knit, just, you know, less up-and-coming players. I mean, I would say that a lot of the guys are friends anyway, but certainly herO and Dark, they play so often against each other. I believe they do, you know, play with each other for some of the team leagues that exist, like the WTL. I think the fact that they're on the same team might mean a little bit more than some other team scenarios, but yeah, it's less to do with necessarily being on the same team and more just to do with how often they face each other. I mean, it's actually kind of crazy. Again, if you want to support these players, please do so at patreon.com/Korean StarCraft League. There's also many other such endeavors, like Wardy doing a Korean StarCraft tournament as well. That's can be supported. And the GSL as well, if you hadn't heard about that one, is also taking Patreon, giving it a go, and adding the additional money given by the community to the overall prize pool. And there's still 1 season of GSL left for 2023. So lots of ways to support directly, which these players will certainly appreciate, as the scene for them is not as strong as it once was, certainly not. But they still remain to be super strong players. And again, very entertaining. I think that certainly lived up to the story that I was building in the first game. You know, there's always that, there's a pretty good chance, actually, that the caster overhypes. And sometimes on purpose, not gonna lie, it's part of our job, right? Like, well, this guy has been killed 50 times in a row, but no one kills this guy 51 times in a row. Sure. But then sometimes it's just, you know, basically a guess. It's 50-50. These guys do play a lot of entertaining games, but such the nature of StarCraft, they also probably play a lot of bop games where it's not very interesting. One player clearly out, just winning against the other. That one was down to the wire. And if herO had maybe consolidated his army a little bit, he would have been a little better off. Of course, there are complications. It wasn't so clear cuts. Perhaps if he consolidated his army and kept it in one gigantic death ball, as Protoss, you know, want to do, it's really what they want when they get to that composition. Maybe they're not killing some of the hatcheries, and so the reinforcements are actually reinforcing, popping out each individual hatchery and collecting them to get a big ol' surround. That would not have been the case in the last game. Dark was low on cash and low on supply. Actually got supply blocks, but, you know, herO can't know that. So just one of those difficult base trade scenarios that is even more stressful because the Lings are literally putting on a timer. You cannot stop the flow of damage that they're doing. So let's see if game number 2 lives up as well. Adept number 1 gets in. It's going to kill 3 Lings at least. Actually, all 4. No reason not to. The natural, I was going to say, is not really a target, because once again, Dark was forced to take the 3rd as a natural. So the Adept might as well just stay in the main base. Indeed, it does. The Queen does pop out. Not quite in the nick of time. Would have been nicer if she was 3 seconds earlier, but, you know, it does take care of the Adepts. And the thing that is lost mostly are minerals to cancels. Actually, also just a straight up macro mistake from Dark. Yeah, no Phoenix was made. So the supply blocked because he just got supply blocked. He was busy dealing with the micro. So if you ever have the same thing happen to you, feel a little bit better about it. So that was probably actually the worst thing about it, was that he got supply blocked. He did cancel his second spore and then figure the one spore is actually something that he needs. He'd be absolutely right about that. It is a Stargate opener yet again. First Oracle is out, sending across the map with the 2 Adepts here. And the second Oracle is on the way. Third Nexus slap down for herO, something that Dark will be able to eventually scout. I know that everything is above board in that way, but it generally is, I suppose, after the Stargate Nowadays, 2 Adepts looking for creep tumors. Not going to actually shade anywhere. Ling speed must be done after all, and it is. 12 Lings are available too, so 12 Adepts, or 2 Adepts, sorry. Would not really want to tangle with that by their lonesome. If they drew the Lings out, you know, the Oracle might have been able to come in and wombo combo, but that's not something that Dark is looking to do. He is purely defensive right now as he continues to drone. Lings only stopping any Adept shades, attempted ones, and then injects drones, evolution chamber on the way, and one additional queen. Those queens did end up helping out a decent amount when it came to the emergency defense of the charge lots that Dark was forced to undertake, because that is how the game first got a little bit wobbly, is that Dark didn't realize he was being charged, not all in, but dedicated. Let's say that. A couple of drones did go down to the 2 Oracles, pairing up together. One's very, very injured. Third Oracle was created, so we do have one of the most classic openers, especially for herO. 3 Oracle into Blink and +1. And that Forge is here, and that 4th Gas is here, though, so not really a lot of emphasis on the follow-up Blink attack. The 2 healthy Oracles were endeavoring to find more drones, but are denied thanks to Dark's Queen placements, which looks mostly on point so far. I'm sure he's usually pretty good about that, but then, of course, they had to collect themselves in the last game, so they weren't necessarily injecting as much as possible. Not supposed to be as much of a problem this time around, so they should be getting their injects. Should be. They see one hatchery without an inject. As we are going for mass Ling again, we as if I'm his teammate, then you're going to need a lot of larvae. So macro hatchery, 4th and a 5th. Certainly warranted and usually very possible for the Zerg to grab at this stage, considering that herO is actually macroing. However, the units show up and get that quick cancel. That next hatchery is off center. Of this, I am 95% sure. They literally put doodad so it doesn't happen. Oh, painful. It's a little unfortunate. Maybe herO will cancel it again as almost a favor to Dark. Nope. Okay, then we're moving on. So the 4th base is done. And right now, that's all that Dark can really afford as far as drone placements for bases. And the 5th will come along eventually. The fact that 4 Adepts are still being as aggressive as this is actually a really professional move, to be honest. So often we would see them surrounded, taken down, or just sent back home to defend. But herO making good use of them with the Oracles, and then even still finding Dark being a wee bit greedy. 23 Lings are on the field, but they actually got Stasis Trap trying to go across the map. It's really perfect timing on the Adepts. Some Lings do finally come here, and that should be enough. But good target fire from the Adepts means that they're actually going to grab 9 drones before going down. 3 Oracles still live as well, so plenty of defense and harassment and scouting left over here for herO. And 4 Adepts are certainly worth the amount of damage and chaos that they cause. herO working on a similar worker count to his opponents. Now, Dark might not be swimming in drones, 80, 85 drones, despite not being on 5 bases, but what he is swimming in is technology, actually skyrocketing up to that hive. He's going to have, what, like an 8.5-minute hive? That's pretty freaking fast, and he's going to be doing it with a lurker den. Now, this could actually be a huge gamble against a more aggressive herO, but in this case, this is absolutely paying off. herO did add on a fair bit of technology himself before going for a 4th base, so he added all of his gases, +2 attack, he got that blink finish, charges on the way, Archons, as well as Storm. So he was investing a lot into the future. And it's not necessarily base-wise first and foremost, but it is clear that he is heading into more of a mid-game, let's defend and wear out the typically aggressive Dark, usually with Lane Bailing Roach Ravager. something like last game, right? And then I'll, see where I am. But this is not that dark, and I'm not sure that herO has picked up on that. This is actually very concerning. Dark has gotten away with his plan. herO doesn't even know what the plan is by the looks of things. To face someone who just gets to lurkers and possibly gets them on your side of the map, no problem whatsoever, is, well, the worst case scenario. Lurkers are somewhat manageable if you're constantly aggressive against them and forcing them to move around, but this might be the first time the Oracles even see Hydras. So they were very late to knowing the intentions of the Zerg. Of course, I believe they did catch a glimpse of the lurkers. If they didn't, at this point, I think it's kind of obvious what is going on with just how much Dark hasn't attacked him, the technology that has been shown, and, well, yeah, add those things two together, and I don't know if you really need a third. And I can't think of a third, so that'll have to be good enough. The point is that Dark has gotten everything he's wanted, and he's actually not even doing this for like any particular type of timing. He's not only getting his Lurker upgrade, but of course he's also grabbing his Hydra upgrades, his Ling upgrades, Double Evolution Chamber upgrades, Nidus Swarm, Baneling Nest, more drones, Spine Crawlers for defense of the future. Like, he could have maybe just put all of his investment into the Hive, into Lurkers and range. And then he has, 10, 12 Lurkers with range, and like I said, shows up on hero's side of the map with that. That's pretty difficult for the Protoss player to defend, even if the lurkers aren't totally upgraded yet. But instead, Dark did just kind of skyrocket up to a more late game situation. herO kind of hobbling along. It's still very difficult for the Protoss to defend lurkers specifically, even though hero's kind of been setting up for this type of defensive, just out, what's the word? Just out endurance, the Zerg player. It's different when you're up against lurkers. That siege aspect really adds a whole nother layer to it, and herO is in some trouble. As you can see, he just doesn't have units that are very effective against the lurkers. He has to kind of jump on top of them, which the rest of his army was actually defending. Another attempted attack on the third base now jumps on top of the lurkers, and they are relatively defenseless. The Oracle is primarily doing, I guess, the most helpful job, but the Zealots also giving up their lives for the greater good. Still probably not worth it. herO was on a lower supply to begin with, not unusual for PvZ. But what it usually means is that you have a higher quality army, and they just have quantity. But when you add in the lurkers, especially with one, if not both of their upgrades, now both are done, it was kind of a high quality army versus a decent quality army, really. And more numbers. And now we just have an even bigger supply gap. Not full of lurkers this time, so perhaps hero's upgraded Protoss quality units will deflect the follow-up, and it seems like they will. This still puts herO in a very rough position. He did fortunately save his economy, so he is trying to afford a transition over into Stargate technology, but it is coming awfully slow. He can definitely not afford to just boost out 4 Stargate units at a time, while also building up the army he just lost. And to gamble to not build any army whatsoever except for Tempest or whatever he wants to build, well, that is a huge gamble. Maybe it would have been worth it, but, well, it's not what he chose to do here. He's trying to build up some type of ground army. Disruptors do help against lurkers. They two-shot them, and we don't have any Vipers in play yet. Dark, definitely can play with spellcasters, but a little more of a punch to the face type of Zerg player for sure. He'll only do it probably when he thinks he needs to, and right now he might not feel like he needs to. Baneling speed's about to finish, as well as +2 missile attack, helping out the lurkers as well. Only 3 lurkers, however, really not the biggest part of this story. Disruptors left a little bit by their lonesome. Do shoot out their balls just to buy some time. That is the last shot from that disruptor. One more in the back pocket there. Might get a good one on top of the Lings. Indeed, it does. hero's supply actually looking pretty strong. Perhaps it was wise of him to just focus entirely on rebuilding their ground army. The lurkers, after all, aren't the major problem, but they are still a problem. Lings also on top of the High Templars, a humongous problem. And in the blink of an eye, hero's sufficient army supply is down the drain. I swear it was just 5 seconds ago he was at more like a 150 or even 160 supply. Now it's all the way down to 115. Dark's attack doing wonders against herO. He was maybe just a little out of position. He was kind of controlling the scenario initially, and then it got out of control very, very quickly. And those 3 lurkers were a surprisingly good anchor. That is probably going to spell a disaster and the end of the game for herO. Yeah. I'm thinking so. Now his economy is actually going to get torn apart. There's absolutely no defenses on the fort, so 100%. This is the end of the game as far as herO is concerned. Nothing in his back pocket to try and make this look decent at all. He's going to do an all-in into the face of the reinforcements from Dark, and it is going to be, well, much, much worse than last game. Last game, it actually made a lot of sense. He probably was maybe supposed to win with it. This time around, this is just very desperate. Like, why not? Why not go for it? But it is not going to work out. This is hardly a sufficient army. And herO will just tap out without even really getting the last battle in. So Dark with a pretty convincing game too. I think just kind of got away with too much. herO did not expect a more late game oriented Dark to attack him, but rather was probably sizing up for more Roach Ravager shenanigans, and instead Lurkers, which really do have to be handled in a very, very different way. So I'm going to chalk that up to, well, kind of poor scouting. You know, the aggression was okay, killing some drones, but then ideally the more you harass, the more you scout. And if you can't harass, then you kind of force a scout, even by suicide. And herO never did that. So a bit unfortunate for him. See if he can bring it back here for game number 3. In the bottom left of game 3 on altitude, we do have DKZ's Dark. And in the top right, it is DKZ's herO. Game number 1, actually looking quite good for herO. That is a charge lot surprise. Sounds like an amazing dish. Which was effective. And then was in a winning position. And, well, perhaps mishandled the finale just a little bit. Maybe a little trip at the finish line. Second game was far more one-sided from start to finish. Perhaps not as much action, but nonetheless one-sided just by these strategies, which StarCraft is still a strategy game, despite some people's hopes that one day it won't even require mechanics. Y'all are weird. I can't believe people come into StarCraft and they're like, I think it's pretty bullshit that I have to have like APMs when I should just be able to outthink my opponents. And it's like, okay, play chess, calm down. I actually imagine every time I hear someone who does that, and there are those people, for sure, I always imagine that they do play chess and they're freaking terrible at it. And they are just blaming whatever the hell they can. And in this case, the almost jock-like mechanics that are required. It actually sounds like they're complaining about jocks. You have to have APM and muscles and stuff. Yeah, I'm going to use my brain. Anyway, sorry. I like complaining about them every once in a while. The point is that strategy kind of worked out there. And while the mechanic of scouting was actually really what is to blame, I suppose, the fact that Dark went for such a different strategy would have already thrown herO for a loop regardless of him scouting it or not. Obviously, without scouting it, he's completely out of position. He's not putting any units on the forefront to even try and buy time against siege units, which Protoss, Zerg, Terran, that's kind of what you want to do against siege units. Is buy time against them or harass them, force them to get out of position. You know, it's actually the same amongst all of them. herO doesn't get to do that. But even if he had scouted the true intentions of Dark, even fairly early on, he had locked himself into a composition and build that didn't really encourage him being offensive. He probably could have used it to be a little bit more on the map, kind of, you know, throwing his hands up in the air and being like, I'm doing stuff. But, you know, he might not have actually found a lot of success with trying to stop Dark from getting there. And as such, herO would have been a little disappointed in the way things had gone. It would have been like, oh, that's what you're doing? Okay, I wish I had done this instead. But of course, that is the game. As soon as you realize something is going one way, you got to kind of match it if you can't interfere with it. And herO never even got that chance. Never even got that chance. I'm sure he would have done a lot differently than what we saw if he had scouted the intentions right off the bat. Even 30 seconds earlier. And again, I think he's a little more out on the map and only try and stall the lurker pressure, which, you know, he cleaned it up, but the fact that it was able to situate itself and get the damage done and kill some of those expensive high-quality units, it kind of struck at the perfect time. Before herO could really position himself, recover the surprise, and transition. Even though his fort-based setup was quite good, he was forced to choose between ground and air army, as I was describing, and not truly a position where he could do both. So this time around, hopefully it's not going to happen just because it creates a lopsided game, not particularly fun. Adept grabbing 2 creep tumors is actually an excellent start. I mean, that was very unfortunate. That was also kind of up. That's just on Dark, isn't it? I think it is. The Overlord saw the Adept incoming, saw the direction of which it was incoming, and the Creep Tumors still planted themselves to the left. Perhaps the timing was really just, you know, that close, and it just is unfortunate. But 2 Creep Tumors, that's, I'd feel good. I'd start joking about winning the game already. Oracle, if it sacrifices itself, kind of turn that all around, and it really shouldn't. 3 drones. That's okay, as long as it lives. It's getting a little worried by its positioning, but it's all right. Now triple Oracle is once again the plan. But the very next is down. Dark has gotten up to 3 hatcheries, obviously. Evolution Chamber once again, so very similar start for our Zerg player and our Protoss as far as comparison to the last game. And the question will be if Dark tries to do the same thing. Now, Altitude is a large map, known for being a macro map, and that might seem like it will encourage Dark to do something similar, but in the grand scheme of Dark stylings, I would say that what we saw in the last game was actually quite rare. And possibly even done because he knows it'll mess up his opponent, you know? Or possibly done because he figured that herO would do exactly what he did and was looking for an easy way to beat it, in which case he was absolutely right. So that, what I'm saying is, doesn't really guarantee he's going to do it again. If this was Snoot, an old name, people probably don't even recognize it, or maybe even herO, but I would say herO's actually a little more flesh out, you know, he can be aggressive and whatnot now, then, you know, I would expect it again, but not necessarily from Dark. And Dark is actually having a lot of trouble in the early game. The Creep Tumors were the first thing. Now the Oracles really digging in to Dark's economy. 12 drones go down alongside 2 Queens. That is an amazing start for herO. All based off of units that, of course, he grabs no matter what. This is not an extra dedication from him, in which case he needed to do damage. This is all just almost extras. It's free cherry and whipped cream, man. It's amazing. Blinken +1 is on the way. herO not setting up for any immediate attack will give Dark time to try and recover from the drone losses, but they were substantial. Also going to be a little supply blocked once again. I mean, Dark certainly has created a lot of names for himself, I suppose, at this point, you know. And I like to focus on the positives, which is that he's just a really fun, entertaining Zerg player who I think has some of the most dedicated spellcaster usage, actually. We see him go into, like, mid-game infestors, I think, more often than a lot of other Zerg players do, but then certainly is not well known for his late game or extreme late game, even though he has a lot of games where he does it. I wouldn't say that we think of him as the invulnerable one at that point. That's herO, right? But the kind of bad side, the true kind of negative side about Dark and what he's made a name for himself for is that his mechanics actually can be a little questionable at times. It's just the straight up truth of it. Not trying to lord it over him as if I'm any better. Absolutely not. A few more drones go down, by the way, to a couple of Adepts. It's just that it is worth noting. Dark sometimes chooses some weird build orders that don't necessarily gel. Sometimes he gets a supply block when he shouldn't. And, well, sometimes the other guy just plays a less mechanical mistake type of game. Which is probably the most awkward way I could say that, but they play a better mechanical game and then they win. And that's actually kind of the simple truth of it. And that might be a little bit of this game. You know, being out of position of the Oracles, not having enough Queens so it snowballs, that happens to a lot of Zerg players. But yeah, Dark kind of missing out on some of the foundational aspects of building the Zerg, right? He has been tripped up multiple times as he runs a route that he's run many times before. herO's been throwing sticks to block his path, and they've worked this time. So Dark, I mean, if he manages to somehow fumble over the sticks laid upon his path and then just roll out if something's a problem, that would be very Dark, but he is in some trouble. And I would say one way to actually tumble out of this and pretend that it was all part of the plan anyway is to get Surprise Spire going, you know? Just be like, you were throwing sticks, but I actually was holding onto a jetpack, sucker. But I don't know. Ling Muta versus someone who is dedicating to Stalkers. Not necessarily the easiest beginning for the Ling Muta player. The Lings are fine against the Stalkers, but we do have charge coming in as well as 5 Oracles helping out. And then the Mutas, well, they need to be in larger numbers to actually take care of the Stalkers. And preferably, they're going to have an upgrade. They will not in this game. Queens going down to the Oracles, which also Oracles going down to the Queens. but 3 oracles live to tell the tale. The queens do not. No queens whatsoever at this point, and the oracles still have juice. They can still help out against the lings if they have to. With charge also on the way and zealots having been formed, it might not be necessary. The stalkers will now have to deal with both lings and mutas. The wombo combo here. The mutas and lings, yes, exactly. Focusing on those stalkers will leave the zealots for later, and perhaps they will just win this battle. herO, without reinforcements coming quick enough, without the knowledge of what his opponent was doing, was caught too aggressive. Had he known that lings and mutas were combining together, then perhaps he would have skedaddled, and that would have made it a much easier game, for sure. If he had just saved those units, even if he didn't kill the 4th base in the process, it still would make it a lot easier, because he could be starting his transition over to Phoenix, Archons, more Stalkers, more set of defense. Now things are a little hairy, exactly what Dark was hoping for when he added on this Spire. 7X Core is absolutely the first target. That means no more Stalkers, no sentries either. Not that's what herO would be producing at this point. And what can herO actually produce? Zealots. He does not have Templar Archives. The shield batteries are trying to finish up here. Phoenix are trying to build up in their numbers. 1 just went down, but 2 are still left over. But is it actually going to be enough, or is Dark actually going to find the perfect moment to kill herO here? herO is still on 4 bases, but his probe count is getting decimated. The 4th base, I'm not even sure Dark knows about it, is happily mining, and that actually is a huge problem. He knows about it, he can't do anything about it. He is trying to end the game, so he has focused all of his reinforcements on the forward path, right into the natural of the 3rd, but the reinforcements are, and he's hoping to snowball, but the snowball has stopped. The lings have been cleaned up from the natural and the main. The amount of army available at the 3rd now beats Dark's available army, and Dark was also really feeling the repercussions of the queen losses. He was banking a decent amount of cash at times, still more than you would want, only now replacing the queens too. And while the mutas can sometimes do a great job at making you look like your macro is perfectly fine, if you are running low on gas, that is not the situation, which did happen for a little bit. Now Dark actually with more gas than not, as he spends money on queens and minerals, drones. 4th base back up for him, 5th base on the way. And a more balanced economy incoming, I suppose, but still forced to disengage with this style of play is usually a very, very bad sign for the Zerg. It's all about the action, it's all about the snowball, it's all about the harassment. And if you don't do any of that, which so far Dark has not, and he stopped with the harassment, then that gives the Protoss often too much time to build up the static defenses, the Phoenix count, as well as a fantastic ground army. Well, that wall is still not remade, so herO's gonna have to deal with lings for the foreseeable future. But the Phoenix are dealing with the mutas totally fine, actually. Six Phoenix seem to be enough, and with the main army approaching Dark's 3rd, Dark just taps out. He was very close to breaking the guy, though. I mean, if he actually had, let's say, 40 more lings, which I don't think is totally impossible, then he might have been able to do it. But the size of the map was always working against Dark when it came to that momentum type of play, and obviously the injects were missing straight up, so maybe even with 40 lings, they still wouldn't have arrived in time. herO does hold on, not only to this game to take the win, but he also holds on in the series. Let's see if he can fully bring it back in Game 4. In the top right of Royal Blood, he is Dark, still up 2-2-1 now. In the bottom left, we have herO, managing to survive the surprise mutas. And then it was pretty much smooth sailing from there. Got a little bit hairy, it was a little concerning, but did what he had to do. And Dark still has a game kind of in his back pocket. Overall, I still feel like he's more in control of the series than herO is, not just because he's up a game, but just even that last game, the one that herO won, feeling like it was on a very razor edge situation, like Dark maybe could have done it even when he was supposed to die. herO is still missing out on some very important scouting. He literally didn't see the Spire. That type of stuff still very much worries me. Dark is looking to end the game in style. He's going to have that hatchery, which will not be noticed for a little while. herO's thinking, I blocked your natural again. I get that every time, don't I? Nah, boo-boo. And he's not going to bother checking the 3rd hatch anytime soon. He is looking for any spawning pool timing that might be suspicious, but he sees a spawning pool timing that is post-hatchery. Because it is. The hatchery is just in the wrong place. So I don't think he caught that drone came back. That would have maybe been something, but No, he has no idea. He has absolutely zero idea. Will the gateway finish and see it? I don't think so. No. When the hatchery itself is done, it will see it. But of course, no reason to make a zealot. No reason to send your probe out. There's no chance of herO seeing this until it is done building lings, building a queen, building perhaps even spine crawlers. Yes, drones are being sent out. And they're being sent out from the larva, which I don't believe the probe actually sees. It doesn't. Oh, I would not have thought of that. I would have just been like, oh, okay, he's going to notice now. Oh, well. But of course, there is still a way for herO to be completely blinded. Just use the larva. They're over here. The probe's over there. Silly boy. The silly boy is thinking I blocked your hatchery. Now I'm messing with your mining. Look at me go. And there is a proxy hatchery, which now he sees the creep and knows that he is in a lot of trouble. The spine crawlers are forming. The stalker is going to get chrono boosted out, but that'll be the only unit for a very long time. herO's plans, very much so, I believe, to go into the Stargate now change over to going into the Robo. Gonna try and pop out an Immortal and a Warp Prism, and hey, that's unlimited micro right there, but it's going to be too late, I think. This is there's been defenses of last seconds scouted proxy hatches. There have. I'm not saying this is a complete success because it was unscouted so far, but it's very difficult. Very, very difficult. herO he's going to lose time to X-Core. He's going to lose his only production facility until that Robo's done anyway, and then that'll be his only production facility. Still not a whole lot. The Nexus will never mine, so it's just a waste of money, basically. I mean, you could argue maybe you can overcharge, but only if the pylon's available. And I'm going to say the pylon's not going to be available. It's going down. The shield battery is not going to be done to try and even save it. The pylon goes down, and everything else will go down with it by the feel of it. The queen even so courageous as to lead the charge off of creep. You go, girl. I do love that this pylon was built. It's going to help wall, and it is going to build the shield battery on the high ground, so I do love that. He was thinking of the next layer, because this layer is gone. You pretty much know that for a fact. And he was thinking of the next layer, but he also was thinking I could buy a little more time at that first layer of wall, and he was wrong. The shield battery and the pylon is problematic. And as I said, the Nexus, never going to mine anyway. Stalker, a little ambitious, trying to do whatever pokey poke it can. Not very much, but as long as it doesn't get surrounded. herO is going to get 2 Immortals, and then I presume the Warp Prism, because that Warp Prism micro, as I said, it really is endless. You know, one queen being built at a time is not really going to help all that much against the micro, and even if the queens were available, we know what Warp Prism Immortal micro looks like against queens. He had a lot of cheeses, even in professional games. So that should ensure herO's safety on one base. The issue then is one base enough? Now, Dark, not exactly mining off of more than one base himself. This isn't anywhere close to minerals, so... And he's actually got a hotkeyed, which a lot of the times, you know, Zerg players intentionally do not do. They do not hotkey their proxy, so they don't build drones unnecessarily over here. But Dark, I think, is actually still doing this on purpose. He's just saying, like, yeah, they're gonna have to arrive, travel from across town, but eventually they'll arrive, and I need the larva. Can't argue with that. He does need a larva. His actual natural hatchery is finally done, though, and his larva will probably be good enough back at home for what he can afford. So yeah, the offensive hatchery should probably only be for offensive units, and Overlord, I guess, is okay as well. No Warp Prism was actually built, by the way. Oh, literally being built right now. Doy. So the Warp Prism is finally on the way out. Cybernetic Core also finally got finished up again, but I see no Warp Gate being researched, and I'm a little suspicious about that. He might have forgotten. I feel like he did. I feel like he forgot Warp Prism, or Warp Gate. He's rebuilding his Nexus, getting his wall back down, just clean up all the creep spread. That's not an issue. But Warp Gate, it's essential to Protoss. It's rather important. If Dark knew there was no Warp Gate on the way, he'd feel really, really, really good about this game. There we go. So you can see basically he went to go warp in sentries, realized he didn't have Warp Gate, and then started Warp Gate, as well as 2 sentries, the traditional way, but that's not the ideal. This is a little awkward. The 2 sentries will have to force field themselves and the main, which means they might not be able to stop the Nexus from dying, but actually the army does return. And they do save themselves. It's actually... That worked out kind of better than expected. With the help of the shield battery just barely touching that sentry on the ramp. And now we have the Central Tickle Beam squad, maybe healing an Overlord. Oh, come on. Come on. I actually thought that was a goner. Sentries, please. Anyway, Warp Gate's still in the way. Like, it's not a problem that he doesn't have it immediately, actually. As you can see, I don't know if having Warp Gate right now is going to help him. Probably not, right? But it is just worrying that he was going to forget it indefinitely. The Immortals in the Warp Prism will try their best to not just be the harassers, try and keep Dark a little suppressed, but they're also the only scouting thing. Well, there's an observer, isn't there? Well, all right. So they're also sometimes the only scouting thing. In this case, not the case, but they certainly want to try and make sure that they know exactly where Dark's army is, what it consists of, primarily where the army is, and they want to go ahead and get ahead of it as long as possible. As long as the Warp Prism Immortal combo is without a counter, then it's going to try and be as active as possible. And we even have dedication to Warp Prism Speed and Disruptor on the way. I mean, kind of a cool follow-up. Getting out of this weird scenario is very, very difficult on the defender side, I think. Not that the Zerg gets to say, like, I did enough damage, now I can just A-move to victory. As we can see, it's not that simple. It's just the Zerg player kind of set the tone, and the Protoss player is the one that's kind of picking up the pieces of an early game, which we know that Protoss, with their low quantity of units, can sometimes struggle to do that, pick and choose exactly what to research and what to produce without falling victim to an overwhelming Zerg force. But, as you can see, they both are trying to size up the situation. We have Dark thinking that an attack might be on the way. He's grabbing a Spine Crawler, as well as a decent amount of Lings, adding some drones. But that Spine Crawler really is indicative. Oh, okay. 2 Disruptors are already available. They will find 1 Queen, not quite the other, and then she almost died! The Queen's so low, no, why? So technically, I guess, they got 2 Queens. Anyway, but the Spine Crawlers, yeah, it's a sign that they're going to be defensive, right? They're static defense. They don't go across the map. So it's actually very odd for me as a, god seeing to see, oh, Disruptors get some fantastic drone shots. 12 drones. That's really good. Oh, I'm trying to say that it would be defensively minded, but then the Ling Ravager army did go across the map. And it found herO completely unaware. I wasn't looking and herO wasn't looking because his major army, the Immortal army, just got surrounded without any help from the Warp Prism or the rest of the units. No shield bed at third base either, and Dark, I mean, he wasn't really setting up to attack necessarily. You see the Spine Crawler, you see the drones, you see the Spire on the way. But he figured that he's going to get on the map and try and at least do something, and then he finds a bunch of vulnerable-looking Immortals to completely surround and decimate. And he's won with that, I think. Because herO now has to replace, 2 armies, I guess, really. He has to replace an army against any ground army he might be facing. But he also has to replace an army that can shoot up, which he doesn't know about? Oh, the Observer just stayed here. Oh, no. Oh, boy. Well, he might be thinking about Spire. Maybe. I don't know. He's got 2 Observers and he doesn't see the Spire. Jeez, that's not cool. That's not how it's supposed to go. No, he doesn't know. I saw a couple Stalkers warp in, which is why I was guessing, but he doesn't know, because if he knew Spire was down and mutas were on the way, I doubt his Warp Prism would be across this map right now. Now, it has no time, actually. It's got no time to retreat. Maybe if it recalled. No, probably not enough. And herO also under pressure from just a handful of Lings. A couple more probes went down. A couple drones also did go down to the Disruptors, and the Warp Prism will successfully escape. Thank goodness he got that Warp Prism speed. But that's still a very dangerous position to be in. Your Warp Prism is basically ineffective. Very, very, very risky to do exactly what herO is doing right now. To send it across the map. And then it's obviously not going to help back at home. So it's, you might say, like, well, why not send it across the map? Well, why not? Like, eventually, ground accompanies mutas. And the Disruptors, if they go across the map, are just going to die to reinforcing mutas. And probably not get any shots off. So they might as well do nothing at home, temporarily, waiting for the ground army. Which is not coming quite yet, actually. And the Warp Prism is probably still going to die, and everything's gone to shit anyway. So, no use overanalyzing it. Dark with a lot of shit, and herO with not so much. Will be winning game number 4 and the series to move on to the finals of the KSL SummerSlam. Let's go ahead to the second semifinal to see who will join him. Will it be Solar or Maru?